Portugal, there's a YouTube show full of fun facts you need to know.
Olá, bom dia, alegria. Monson here with the Good Morning Portugal show, the podcast, and the Portugal Club. Join us at the Portugal Club. It seems social media, all of it, AI, just seems to be getting crazier and crazier. So if you want a nice curated experience that isn't full of ads and algorithms and AI, come join us at the Portugal Club. It actually feels like the equivalent of being in a room playing 78 records, where you can have a really nice, quiet environment without loads of ads crashing in and AI suggestions and bots and stuff. So come and join us over at gmpvip.com. Special guest this morning is Mel, who is standing in her field, somewhere here in central Portugal. Let's give her a nice big, should we do a round of applause or should we do some gumper dust? Let's do some restful gumper dust and bring her onto the screen. Wafting in. Olá, bom dia. Tudo bem?
I feel like a fairy now with gumper dust.
Very suitable. It's a good thing as well, by the way. But I think it's quite suitable, like a sprite or a fairy in your wonderful land there.
That's it. Actually, I have to say, I'll tell you a quick story before we start, Carl. I was camping out here and I didn't know of these little things. This is last year. And I didn't know of these little things called pirilampus. We don't have them, the night lights. And I thought the aliens had arrived. I'm walking outside going, what on earth is going on? There's little flashing lights all in the field here. And then I thought, is there fairies? Have I found some mystical thing? And it was just the pirilampus.
They're magical, aren't they?
Yeah, they're great. They're great once you realise you're not being invaded.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised you don't have those in Australia. You have everything else. But if they were Australian, they would probably bite you as well as light your path, wouldn't they?
Well, possibly so. And we do have little light glowy bugs, but they tend to stay lit, whereas these flash on and off. So I was just seeing these little flickers of light all over the place.
Yeah.
So.
And and smartly you picked up the Portuguese a word for them. Pirilampus, did you say?
Pirilampus, yeah.
I didn't know that. I've been calling them fireflies fireflies rather than glowworms. And I love seeing them. And I remember the very first time I saw them in central Portugal, camping in a yurt. It was really magical. But yeah, I guess if you're not expecting it, you could think it's happening.
It's happening.
Yes,
the
because
apocalypse is here.
We are a little bit on edge with this sort of thing at the moment, aren't we? And that's my question to you this morning. You are Simply Live Mel, endeavouring to live simply, moving to Portugal to live simply. And it seems like the world is getting more complicated and tumultuous. How are you managing that process at the moment, Mel?
I gotta say, honestly, I don't think I'm coping very well. But I knew it was coming. You know, I think many of us kind of knew something crazy was coming, and it just gets more and more chaotic. And I remember thinking in 2020, beginning of 2020, I actually said to a friend of mine, here we go. This is it. 5 years later, and now I think I'm just tired. You know, it's 5 years later, and now it seems to be really ramping up. But I'm like, oh, come on, you know, like,
come on,
come on.
Well, can I quiz you a little bit on that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you've used the word "it" twice, like the event, the thing. What do you mean? I think people have an idea of what you mean, but what do you mean by that?
Well, to be honest, I'm not really sure, and it depends on what time of the day you ask me. I think, though, that we know that the world, in my opinion, the world has been very structured in a very manicured, given to us in a certain perspective way.
Yeah.
And we're starting to realize that's not valid and true. And some of us saw through it a long time ago. Some of us are thinking of it, and some still think that's crazy. But, you know, in order for something to change dramatically, and it has to change, there's often chaos before, you know, it's, and that's normal. What that takes the form of, I'm not really sure. And how it ends up, I wouldn't say I'm really sure. I have theories, but as I say, I think they vary from day to day.
Yes.
But I think, you know, all of our structures have to collapse. I think that most people, even those who don't believe in any sort of conspiracy theory sort of concept, certainly feel that, our democracy is not a democracy anymore in any country. When
Yeah.
you have in Portugal, what did we have? The leader got 33% of the vote or something. We have a two-party system in many countries that just people don't like either of them, but they're there. And the people at the top of them, you look at them and saying, is this the best that we've got? Like, really? How did they get there?
Yes.
So if that's our definition of democracy, something has to change.
Yeah.
And that I don't think anybody has a really good vision of how that will play out. But as I say, it's any structure creates fear and anxiety. Any structural change
Mm.
creates a bit of fear and anxiety and what's happening and I don't understand and what's this all leading to. I try and just get into my land as much as I can and put my head in the sand and
Oh, good for you. It sounds like a good
theoretically it's your
plan.
feet on the sand, isn't it, with grounding. I try and stick my head in it as well just to
Yes, like
block out the noise.
full body grounding. We use the head as well. No, okay, I get it. So I think it would be difficult for most people to deny or not acknowledge the process of change for humanity, and something quite specific might be giving way to something else because it's unsustainable. And the it is a symptom of that marks the change, potentially, if I understand you correctly. And I
Yeah.
on that basis I would completely agree, by the way. And yeah, this was a great meme that came up only this morning on my social media. I can't believe it's World War III season already. I still have my pandemic decorations up. And that I think chimes with what you were saying, right? What you thought 2020 was that thing, that seismic moment where the edifice would be crumbling and giving way to something else.
And it did. I think one of the great things with that, which maybe because of its timing didn't get utilized as best as it could. The upside and downside of that is we were all very isolated. And
Yeah.
a lot of people started to tap into things that they'd never tapped into before. And I think there seems to be a little bit of a process. There seems to be for want of a better word, because I don't like the term at all, a conspiracy theory rabbit hole where people look at, this is our world and this is what's wrong with it and all of that. And they get very angry and fear-based. And it's almost like a grieving cycle of some
Yeah,
sort,
sure.
there's this fire
Understandable.
up. But then it's like, okay, well, that's what it is. So and that can take 6 months, 1 year, 10 years, 20 years. And then there's this, but hang on, there's something else. And what are we being distracted on? What are we looking away from?
Yes.
And during COVID, a lot of people started to realize that and started to look at what are we, there's a massive uprising in things that podcasts and videos that we've never seen before, next solve this and people talking about near-death experiences and telepathy and teleporting and all sorts of stuff and having experiences they couldn't explain, being
Yes.
connected to things they couldn't explain. And I'm stunned with how many people that I look at that don't look like they've just come off a hippie commune in Nimbin, which is in Australia. Just
What,
regular.
Byron Bay vibes, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But people that aren't from that I consider really conservative in appearance and style, everyday people that suddenly go, "Oh, yes, I think that too." Yeah, I've had some experiences and, I'm connecting in with this greater thing and I've started meditating or I've started connecting with God or whatever their thing is. But
Mm.
then, I've had these experiences that I can't explain. And I just get so stunned at the, people don't necessarily say it out loud in public spaces like this, but when you're sitting quietly having the coffee with them and say something, they go, "Oh, yeah, oh, you too, okay." And I
Mm.
think this massive awakening into, um, potentially what we're capable of that we haven't realized before was a byproduct of the COVID thing that I think people pushed into, then pulled away from. Some didn't because they were still dealing with the fear and anxiety of COVID itself. And now we've got that fear. And I think personally that fear drama, fear division drama, which we're on speed with it now. It's like someone gave maybe it's an AI driven thing that has sped it up so much. But, do you remember last week when this happened? No, because yesterday and this morning, this happened and that happened and this happened. And, events which we would have talked about for a year.
Yeah.
We're now forgotten about in 24 to 48 hours. But in the meantime, there's
Absolutely right.
outrage.
Yes.
And the other thing I'm really noticing, I'm not on a lot of social media, and the ones I'm on, I try to dip into very quickly. But what I see is that people and I don't want to get into the politics, it's not about the politics, but if you look at the proponents of, say, the MAGA movement right now, 3 months ago it was Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk and this person, whoever. All of a sudden, Elon goes off the rails. And so I saw a post yesterday that someone put into something saying, I'm not really sure what to do about Tucker Carlson. I used to follow him, but now should I block him? About one thing he said in one interview on something, I don't even know what it was.
Yes.
And I'm going, we've got this. And it was like, I don't know what to do. I feel so conflicted. This was someone I thought was amazing and on our side, and now he's not on our side. And, how dare he say this? And I'm like, oh my goodness.
He's
feel
meant
like
to
I'm
be like that. Yeah,
kindergarten.
it is interesting that, isn't it? Because I got a bit activated. Curious, I would like to think, but I think there was probably a little bit of bristle going on as well. I saw something that had been reported by an American political commentator talking about Trump, talking about the UK, and the question was on social media: how do British people? How does this make you feel? And I kind of resented that question. That this was designed to make me feel something, and I had no choice in the matter. And I think that's the sort of thing you're talking about, isn't it? It's like a massive emotional fairground where I'm going to go on the Tucker Carlson ride because I feel good on that one, but the other one ride, the whatever, the Bernie Sanders ride makes me feel a bit sick, or vice versa. I'm not picking. I don't.
I'm not interested in politics at all.
Yeah.
But the key thing that I see though, Carl, is that on almost every issue, everything over the past few years has been twisted in such a way that something that you fully believed in 5 years ago, 10 years ago, suddenly it's been twisted in a way you go, hang on, I don't believe in that, actually. And the way that it's being done is twisted. So suddenly you're going, well, hang on, now I'm not on that side. I should be on that side because now and that's what they're doing with the people as well. And I think it's part of creating this fear, this chaos, this division. And we don't even, as fast as they're dividing the men and the women, they're dividing the cultures, the race wars. But then, they'll bring up something where this person's a good one. So now we don't know whether we should support those people because, and so you're in this constant thing of who's my tribe?
Yes.
And I think that's part of it, Carl, moving on to where we're going. I think and I've mentioned to you before, I think it's critically important that we build community and find our tribe.
Yes.
And it becomes very difficult to find a community tribe because everybody can probably disagree with anybody on any issue right now.
Yeah.
The people you thought you would align with and have most in the value system with before, suddenly you go, oh, I don't like the way they say that. And because of all, as you say, everything we're being asked to do evokes this emotion, not just a little bit. You don't just see something on the news once a day and go, oh, they're stupid, aren't they? And move on. It's like now we have to discuss it and thresh over it and who supports and doesn't support.
Call somebody, call a friend.
And
Yes.
so we get really angry over it. So normally, if we had, back in the day when I was a child, if you disagreed with someone on a perspective, a point of view, you just kind of still sat and had coffee with them and moved on. It wasn't
Yes.
a big
Would you
deal.
like another drink? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Would you like another drink? It's interesting, isn't it? For sure. Yeah, and I wonder where that's going because, and I think that this you make a very interesting point about community, which is something I've been fascinated in for decades now, and have been involved in the business of intentional community, which was a complete disaster in many ways, a very educational, but a complete disaster. And I think really because I was approaching it from an ideological point of view, and that's where the trouble seems to start. If communities built on a big idea outside themselves, I think can work quite well because you refer up and punch up, if you like, rather than punch each other. And
Mm.
communities based on crisis or mutual aid also work because you haven't got time to think about, are you thinking the right things for me to want to be in your company? You just like, there's a job to be done and you get on with it. And I think that works really well. It's the harvest time, isn't it? Like we could have a bit of a chat in our brief lunch with our lemonade and sandwiches, but then it's back to work. And perhaps those are the circumstances that are being created that we will just not have the luxury of falling out with each other over stupid things as they turn out to be.
Well, I also think that we were, ironically, I actually feel we were much more tolerant. We're taught
Yes.
now to do tolerance, and we don't have any tolerance at all.
Or
Someone
diversity and
sneezes
acceptance.
over and we need to sue
Yes.
them.
Yes.
Um, so we're caught in this world, and I think that's just to do with lack of face-to-face interaction. And I
Right.
suppose when I'm talking about community, I'm not talking about the intentional style. I'm talking about being in your local town and chatting to the neighbors. And, even this morning, I came out of my house and I went, wow, there's a strong smell of smoke. And
Mhm.
it was like a plasticky smell. It was horrible. And I went, that's not normal. Like at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, that's not normal. And so I jumped in the car and then I was like, I can see that over there. I just quickly drove over and it was coming out of a house, but it still smells wrong. And it was coming out of the chimneys. But I'm thinking, who's got chimneys going at 7 o'clock in the morning? Like, I don't think maybe their house is on fire. And I saw some guys and I pulled up and said, hey, do you know what's going on over here? And it turns out the guy's making tromoso, which I don't
Oh,
know how they
okay.
make it, but it must smell bad. And it was fine. But that's the thing that we need is that people, and in my town, people do it. I've had someone knock on my door because they hadn't seen me for a few days just to make sure I wasn't sick.
Nice.
Um, that's what I mean. We don't have to live in the same compound. We just need to know each other and
Yes.
reach out and say, "Are you okay?" And what do you need? And, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear this, can I do something for you?" Neighbour's being treated for cancer at the moment, so I said, they haven't taken me up on the offer, but I said, "If you need me just to go shopping for you or just let me know." It's that sort of thing I mean by community. And also in having these personal interactions where we're actually talking to people and being off the net. I'm feeling very almost like, I don't know what the work is, dark energy sucking me into the computer at the moment, like more than I have been for a long time. It's like I can't take my eyes off it for some reason.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be off it. I think it's almost a spiritual war. I think we need to spend more
I'm
time
feeling that as
away.
well. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I got a great sense of that last night and again and again this morning. No, I hear you on that. Okay, so you might be in some sort of alignment with my thought processes and vice versa because I was writing yesterday my new column for the Resident. And there were four things that came up, and it was the global chaos, which I think we've touched on this morning, technological change, mainly AI, and because we live here, the crisis in Europe, the identity crisis, what's to become of Europe going forward demographically, politically, all of these issues that I think, again, you've referred to, the illusion of democracy, that sort of thing. And then the fourth thing for me, which is the one where the action is the historic moment. And this is what you opened with. What's possible now as a result, maybe, of the big symptoms presenting themselves of the first three. The fourth thing to me is, okay, so this is bringing us to a historical moment. You said 2020 was a similar thing. Here we are 5 years later, poised in a similar historical or momentary crux. And that to me means it can be the thing that is in this dark energy of the web of like World War III, the nuclear climax, this sort of thing. Or alternatively, the other side of that is an evolutionary point and breakthrough and moving on, which again you've referred to as well. How do you see that? What do you think is possible if we think and engage less with that dark stuff and turn our faces to the light, as it were, whether that be metaphorically or actually?
Yeah, I think the sky's the limit, really. And I think that's part of the reason why there's a energetic shift to keep us on the computer, because there's such a lot of people working on skills. There's such a lot of information coming out. And if we break through as human beings and develop some of those, and just one example, for example, I've mentioned to you before, been watching these amazing things called the telepathy tapes. And it's quite fascinating. If we could develop telepathy, we don't need the internet. We don't need phones. We don't need, like, just that one little skill alone means that unless they find, and when I say they, I don't know what they is, and this is a way to tap into those frequencies. We know that on things like the internet and the phones and so on, they've changed the frequencies. They've changed the frequencies on our music, all of these sorts of things to change the way our brainwaves function. So if we can work with telepathy, then we have that direct line. And that changes the world. Just that, you can imagine if we had telepathy and teleporting as a skill base. We don't need planes. We don't need visa entries. We don't need, there is no Europe. When there's a world. There's a world that we can just communicate with. We know the intention of the person coming at us, whether they're good for us, bad for us, whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Which we already know. We already have a fair degree of telepathy. You can walk into a room and go, something's not right here. I don't trust this person. I just had a coffee with a friend the other day, and I went to a much trusted friend's function and loved it. Great people, And I was sitting next to this one man who, as far as I knew on paper, was a much loved and trusted member of this thing. And I could barely speak to him. I could barely talk to him. I just thought, you are a dangerous man. I don't trust you.
Right.
And I mean that quite literally.
Yes.
And then, yes, the person I was talking to was saying, yes, they've been violent. Yes, they've always someone having affairs. They've got multiple this going on and that going on. And, some questions over their sexual conduct, whether it's consensual or not, and violence. And I was literally so repulsed. I was, it was someone I was literally pretty well sitting next to. And I can make small talk with anybody. And I pretty well turned and talked to the person the other side. I kind of went, oh, and then he made some smart-ass, smarmy comment. And I just went, oh, that'll be right, or something. He said, oh, the party's on now because I'm here. And I said, well, you'd think that. And I just looked away. And this is like the first thing I said to him. I just went, oh, my God. I just was repulsed by him.
Amazing. So your instincts were correct as well, as it turns out.
Well, and yeah, as it turns out. And I think that, part of years of traveling solo and living solo helps with that. But, we have that skill.
You're right.
Now it's just a matter of ramping it up,
yes.
like taking
and
it to
believing it, right?
level.
And accepting it, because that's the thing, isn't it? Is that we our agency has been shifted, hasn't it, to external validation rather than trusting and believing our own inner compasses and radars and senses and intuitions and instincts and so on.
And I think that, and I see some amazing things with healing modalities as well.
Yes. Yes.
You know, so this gives the power back to us as individuals.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that whole thing of, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but to what degree do we need a government structure organising the fixing of the roads and the whatever, if we have an ability to heal each other, take care of each other, say, hey, you know, telepathically, I'm stuck on my land, I've got stuck in the mud, can someone come and help me? If the neighbours know that, oh, we need to move more stones down there, you know, then we don't need a government to say you haven't fixed the roads properly. This sort of stuff, if we're working together more, but I'm not saying that's going to happen overnight.
But it's useful in a sort of mythical sense, isn't it, to highlight what's possible? I think, yeah, that's probably the best anarchy rebuttal I've ever heard, or anti-anarchy rebuttal, because like that is the classic question, isn't it? Who's going to fix the roads? And that assumes that everything else is the same apart from the government, and things don't work like that today. We're not going to just change one thing. It's like everything's changing at the moment, and we do have some agency and say in that, unless we're completely jammed and bombarded by dark and difficult messages and kept in a state of emotional tension.
And when we look back, from what we've been told anyway, I question everything these days, we know that there's been civilization collapses. You know, the Roman Empire, the Tartaria, all these other whatever, Atlantis, whatever. You know, supposedly that's all happened and it's accepted that that happened. We may well be facing that now. That doesn't mean that we're all going to disappear. It just means that the structure of everything is very much under threat. And people are saying...
Absolutely, because life continued, didn't it? What we're looking at is the archaeological
we're
end.
Still here.
Exactly. We're looking
Humans
at
when we think...
Absolutely. When we look at civilization collapse and change and transformation, we're looking at it archaeologically and historically. But the live element has persisted very interestingly. Thank you, Mel. I'm aware that we've been talking for almost half an hour now, and I'd like to conclude, if I may, by asking you how Portugal fits into this, and if it still does for you. I only just, the Our Rich Journey folks, they've done a nice sort of clickbaity video of like, we've been here 6 years. People are saying it's not a great place to come anymore. We'll give you our truth and our answer. I'm going to do a spoiler. They're quite happy here, and I'm glad to be able to say that. But do you see Portugal as a good front seat in the big pantomime that is occurring in front of us?
I think I do, only from that perspective, only because I think it's a backseat. And sometimes it's kind of nice just to sit back and go, you know, I'd hate to be in America right now. I wouldn't like to be in Australia right now. Wouldn't like to be in the UK right now. I think to be able to sit back, it's almost like, okay, it's like during the war, you know, my mum was billeted out to get away from the danger and get on with life and be ready to come in and restock things once the nasty was over. That's not to say that Portugal won't have any role to play. And I wonder, I've often wondered why I'm here, that there seems to be some spiritual connection for a lot of people. A lot of people said they just kind of ended up in Portugal and they don't know why. But there must be a reason. I feel a bit that way as well. And so it's a nice place to be. I'm glad I'm here over everywhere else. And whether there's I also think it's very interesting that I'm from Australia and it's almost directly through the planet. It's, you know, if you drive a pole through.
Oh, I see. The thing that they used to say this to us as kids in the UK: if you keep digging, you'll end up in Australia. Actually, the truth is Portugal and Australia on the other sides.
It's actually just off the shore. I think I worked at it was about 300 kilometres offshore on the south of Australia, straight through, and that's really interesting. And look at all of our eucalyptus. Why do we have eucalyptus here? You don't have eucalyptus in the UK. You don't have eucalyptus in Spain. Why does Portugal have all this eucalyptus and wattle, which is the national flower of Australia is
Is that
here. It's
right?
called, I think it's called mimosa here.
Yes.
That's the national flower of Australia, the little yellow budded flower.
Well, I never.
So there's some really interesting connections. So I'm here. I think that there's some reason that I'm here. There's some spiritual connection to the land. There, I believe, are a few myths or legends that Portugal will start something. A few Portuguese have told me, but you don't know whether that's ego of, yes, we
I'll
were
take it.
always
I'm going
here
to
as
take it.
something to bring on the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that it's one of the easier countries, except for maybe Africa or third world countries, but it's one of the easiest first world countries to create that community based, because
Well
there's
said.
still many people like my town who still kind of live in it.
Yep.
Uh,
Well said. Well spotted. Absolutely. Yeah.
so we'll see.
I like what you did there. So there's an evacuation metaphor, going back to the Second World War motif and
Sounds very
history
clever.
of. But also, it's not a front seat; it's a back seat with a very good view of the show and a nice place to be. Not too exposed in the front row there when people start throwing popcorn and their drinks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mel, excellent. I love the POV there, and thank you very much for that. I'm sure you will stimulate other people to contribute their views on that. And I think a lot of sort of kinship with and wavelength and vibes that you've been talking about this morning. I think a lot of people would resonate with that. So thank you very much indeed. Have a lovely day there on the land where it seems timeless and beyond the realms of AI and all this tech stuff that can make.
Amazing.
It's good for you. All right, cheers, Mel. See you next time.
Okay.
Come past you on the way out. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
In Portugal, there's a YouTube show full of fun facts.